people having different things, so stressed and anxious. Yeah, I think that I don't know if you were in here before, Rebecca. I was actually talking about how I was on a webinar early on this morning and my whole internet just shut down. So that was really fun, trying to figure that out. So yeah. All right. So we've got a few different people feeling a few different things right now. So what we're going to talk a little bit about now is beliefs. So I truly believe that our belief systems create who we are. It creates our perception. It creates our reality. So perception is reality to me. So what I want to do now is I'm going to actually share a belief that I had about myself for many, many years that actually turned out to be very, very negative. So I'm actually going to show you what happened to me by having this belief. So bear with me for 1 second while I figure out how to share a screen because, hey, technology ain't my friend today. All right. I don't know if you can all see that. So that is a picture of my face. So this is actually a picture of my face after the second time I burnt out. So a lot of you, if you don't know my story, I've actually burnt out twice in my life. I have worked in corporate sales. I have worked in recruitment. So a lot of what I have done in my life has led me down the road of burnout. Now, majority of my life, I would have told you that I was motivated, I was driven, I was always wanting to succeed. And what I didn't realize was how that was impacting my health. Now, I truly did not believe for a very long time that I suffered from stress or any type of anxiety. I assumed that I was completely fine. I was just driven. I was really successful. But what ended up happening was I was being told that I was, possibly suffering from stress and anxiety when realistically, I truly believed I didn't. So I was in complete denial, and my belief was that, no, I'm just successful, this is something else. So that was one of my beliefs that I had. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Oh, quickly, the reason why I call it Shirin Baratheon face, if you can see the title up there, is because when I woke up in the morning with that on my face, the first thought in my head was, holy shit, I look like Shirin Baratheon. So that's why I call it Shirin Baratheon face on that side. Did you see? Yeah.
Hello. I'm sorry to butt in, but we can't see the presentation. We only see your screen. Sorry.
We can just see your desktop at the moment, I think, Katie.
Oh, let me click that. How about that? No? Maybe if I do this. Is that working? It's not working, is it? Picture of an island. Yeah. That's not my face. All right, so this isn't going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it in the chat and then you guys can look at it there. So I'm going to stop sharing. My apologies. I didn't know that. So let me pop the picture in the chat if I can. Can I do that? Look at all this working for me. I love this. I love technology. It's really been my friend today. Okay, so I can't actually do that, but that's okay. So what the picture actually was a picture of my face with a cold sore that literally started from the bottom of my lip that went down my chin and all up my face. I sincerely had a cold sore that went up a quarter of my face. Now, during the time of that period, I wasn't just suffering from a cold sore. I was also suffering from really dramatic health issues, including digestive health issues. I wasn't digesting food. I had severe allergies and intolerances to many different foods. It was probably easier for me to tell you what I could eat rather than what I couldn't eat. And I was also suffering from dramatic amount of inflammation. So for me, that was definitely a moment in time where I was like, okay, cool. I really need to start changing my beliefs and my thoughts about stress and anxiety and having the impact on the body. Now, the most embarrassing part was I actually had a double degree at this stage of nutrition and advanced physiology. So I should have really known better. But at the end of the day, it was a belief system. Now, that belief system actually caused me to be in a lot of pain for a very long time. I was actually in a lot of, I was actually suffering with health issues for about 3 to 4 years before I actually started taking stress and anxiety seriously. I ended up spending around 30,000 Australian dollars, which is around 15,000 pounds, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So it really did lead me down a very toxic place in my life. And that was purely based on a belief system. Now, with beliefs, what's really interesting, it's how we perceive what's right and wrong and how we want to live. Now, beliefs aren't all bad. Some beliefs are really, really good. So for instance, I believe that fitness and exercise is really good for you, which it really is, and that's a positive. What's really not good is the self-limiting beliefs. Now, when I was saying to myself, do you know what? This isn't stress and anxiety. It can't possibly be that. It's going to be something else. I actually shut down. It's like I shut up shop on even looking at it as a possibility and looking for solutions. And so this is what really happens when we have negative beliefs. Now, what I want to do is I kind of want to throw it over to you guys. I want to have a bit of a chat about beliefs that you possibly have, or maybe you have somebody that you know that might have a negative belief or a negative thought process that's actually potentially quite damaging. So does anyone want to share? So the chats is going up. So Danielle said a little while ago, the body lets you know when once you slow down. Yeah, I didn't listen to it. So I absolutely agree with you. Everything has to be perfect. I think that's a big one. You know, I work with a lot of people who think that perfectionism is a thing. Anyone else want to put out a belief, or maybe there's even a potential, somebody who has a belief. My mum only sees the negative in everything. Really sad to see. Yeah, my mum has the same kind of thing. So I started my career as a nutritionist, and one of the beliefs that I constantly heard that left a lot of people unable to get going in their health and weight loss journey if they're wanting to lose weight or even just change, was actually saying, oh, I'm this way because of genetics. I'm this way because it is who I am, and those types of things. We might have even have managers going, oh, you have to listen to me. It is the way it is, and that's what it is, and there's no changing that. So who's got a manager or know somebody that says those types of things? It's like, it is what it is. I'm not changing. Yeah, I think we've all had one of those managers. All the questions, the people are writing in now. That's awesome. Yeah, so I think the thing is with belief systems, it's really understanding how we can challenge them in a really effective way. And I think one of the things that we need to really understand is how our mindset can work. Now, a lot of the work that I do is actually on growth mindset. So how many of you have heard growth mindset? I heard about growth mindset. Yeah, Paul, you have? Just pop it in the chats if you have. You haven't? Okay, awesome. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to give a bit of an overview about growth mindset and the belief systems based around the growth mindset. So really interesting, there was this lovely lady from Stanford called Carol Dweck, and she believed initially that our intelligence was fixed. It was, you're either smart or you're not smart. You can either learn new things really quickly or you can't. There was no in between. It was a fixed mind. It was a fixed mindset on intelligence is what it is, and you're either have it or you don't kind of attitude. Now, what she actually ended up doing was she went into a class of 10-year-olds, and the first exercise she gave them was a really simple, pretty much on par with what they've been learning, and an exercise that was, age appropriate for them, that wasn't too challenging, and let them see how they were going. Now, so they all did really well. They were all doing the kids, were doing fine. The second exercise she gave them was really challenging. It was something, that was going to challenge them a little bit more, make them a little bit more uncomfortable. And her belief was that they would give up and they wouldn't even give it a go. They'd be like, oh, I can't do that. So therefore, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to stop. It's too hard for me. What she actually found was the complete opposite. There was kids actually going in there or saying things like, oh, thank you so much for challenging me. Oh, thank you. I didn't think I was going to learn anything today. So thank you for helping me learn something, which you don't hear a lot of kids say, but it made her realize that mindset isn't fixed. It's actually something that you can develop and you can grow. So even though we don't know something, we can actually develop it and be excited about challenging that. Now, the way that she looked at fixed and growth mindset was, a fixed mindset was, having that ability is believing that you are the way you are and that's it. You can't change it. It's set in stone. You can't mold it. You can't grow on it. It is what it is. Whereas the growth mindset is believing that you can develop new skills, you can develop new learning abilities, and you can challenge beliefs and break out of negative mindsets. You can, increase your intelligence in any way, as well as changing your personality. One of the things that I learned that was really tough for me was I believed that stress and anxiety was a part of who I was. I had a very fixed mindset that stress and anxiety was something that made me who I was, it made me successful. But what I ended up having to do was actually develop a growth mindset and understanding, actually, maybe that's not the only way it can be. Maybe there is another option there, and maybe it is challenging. Maybe it's going to be a little bit painful, but in saying that, it was something that was really worthwhile on challenging myself with. So I want to sort of open it up and have a bit of a discussion about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset before we move on. So does anyone want to share a little bit about an idea of potentially having a fixed mindset, or even somebody that they know? I know that we just had this conversation, but now having a bit of context behind it. What's something that you've either heard other people say, or something that you say to yourself that you believe is true about you, or someone else believes about themselves? Anyone want to share? It's okay if you don't. All right. That they can't help their situation, not in public. I love that one. I had a boyfriend, because I'm a bit quirky. So I had a boyfriend one time that was like, don't do that. People are looking. It's like, I don't care. It is what it is, right? They can't help their situation. They stick to what they know. Exactly. Sometimes we get stuck in what we know and we don't challenge ourselves to get out of it. So what I want to talk a little bit about now is how can we challenge ourselves, but also understanding the makeup of the brain. So here's the thing. When we challenge ourselves, or when we are putting ourselves in a situation to make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable, we actually have a part in the brain that actually tells us, hey, don't do that. Like, it actually is quite stressful. So how many of you were in my last webinar with Paul? Just so I have an understanding. So I don't want to go over the same stuff that I did in my last webinar, but who was in the last webinar? No. Yes. 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 No. No. Okay. So okay. Hey, Paul, you filmed that, right? You've popped that video up?
Yeah, that's filmed. Yes, that's there ready to go. It's going to be shown next week.
Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over just a brief thing that I touched in that webinar. And I actually would recommend go watch that webinar, because it really did talk about the impact that stress and anxiety has on the body and what we can do about that. I'm sort of digging in a bit deeper to that from that webinar. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how our brains work and how we actually make decisions and how we actually can challenge that and how we can use the brain chemistry and understand how we're thinking to actually challenge ourselves out of either the fixed mindset and getting into the growth mindset. So just really quickly, the way that the brain works and the way that our systems work is we have 3 different parts to our brain. So we have the survival part of our brain, the limbic part of our brain, and the neocortex of the brain. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of break that down so you have a better understanding about how we make decisions and how we actually act. So we have a survival part of our brain. Now, the survival part of our brain, some people call it the reptilian part of the brain or the lizard part of the brain. I personally like to call it the survival part of the brain, which pretty much has evolved. It hasn't evolved since we were first human beings. So when we were back in hunter-gatherer times, or when we were first on this earth, whatever your belief systems are about that is fine. But whenever we were first on this earth, this was the part of the brain that kept us alive. It's the part of our brain that has let us be who we are today, because realistically, that part of the brain is just telling us this is how we survive. Now, how many of you have heard about the fight or flight response? Yep. Yep. Okay. Most people have heard about the fight or flight response. So the fight or flight response, just briefly, is that part in the brain that automatically gets stimulated when we come across a potential threat. So if we go back into hunter-gatherer days, we have a bit of a history lesson, and let's say we're walking down a path, we see a lion, tiger, or a bear. That part of our brain gets stimulated, and it's like, okay, cool, I need to actually create a physical response in the body to allow us to either run away or fight that potential threat. So it really was important for that part of our part of our life. We still have this. So sometimes it's what we have to do is being able to overcome that part and how we can actually get out of the fight or flight and get back into rational thinking. Because when we're in fight or flight, or when we're feeling anxious, or when we're feeling scared, it really is hard to actually be able to make a good decision. It's really difficult to, make a good analytical decision, as making sure that we're doing the right thing. So how many of you actually can attribute to when you're feeling a little bit stressed or anxious, it's really hard to make a decision, or it's really hard to think clearly? How many of you would agree with that? I've noticed that. Yeah. Yeah. Overconsumed. Yeah. So I'm going to actually help you with that. So I'm going to help you get out of that and go into the next parts of the brain. So the second part of the brain, which is what I said, the limbic part of the brain, that's the emotional center. So that's where we actually are able to make some kind of decision, but it's still a very emotional decision. And sometimes our emotions, they can lead us down a good path, or they can lead us down a bit of a bad path where we can lash out, and it might actually make the situation worse. So that's the decision emotional part of the brain. And there's nothing wrong with having emotions, but sometimes we've got to make sure that the emotion doesn't dictate our behavior in a negative way. So sometimes we've got to be able to go, okay, cool, I'm having an emotion, and then being able to choose the behavior we want. And so I'm going to talk about an exercise based around that as well. Now, the third part of the brain, yeah, the chimp paradox actually is a really good book to read, Danielle. Now, the third part of the brain, the top part, which is the neocortex part of the brain, which is the frontal cortex, is what we would call the human center, the rational, the analytical part of the brain, where we're feeling really calm, we can actually make really good decisions. So I actually do recommend reading The Chimp Paradox. I was actually going to say that, Danielle, but you brought it up now, so I will say that. I would actually say it's a really good understanding about how to actually be in that conscious mind. Now, the problem that we have is we're humans. So we have to be respectful of our emotions, as well as the survival part of the brain, and how we can actually go from one to the other one. Go from one to the survival part of the brain into the neocortex, so we can make really good decisions, so we can get out of that reactionary phase into more of a proactionary phase that we need to be in to be able to make decisions, so we can overcome stress and anxiety and things like that. So what I want to do here is, before I go into the exercise, I want to see if there's any questions, if anyone wants to come out and add anything, if they just want to say something. Does anyone want to jump in before I move on? Makes sense so far. Perfect. The other part that I talk about in this area in my previous webinar is the impact that has on our body. So being in the fight or flight response has a dramatic impact on our body. So I know you couldn't see the picture, which I'm super upset about, but the reason why I had such bad health issues was because I was constantly in a stressful state, which was increasing my cortisol and adrenaline, which have a huge impact on our bodies. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we can actually overcome the cortisol and the adrenaline to actually help us get back into a really good rational thinking part of the brain. So what I want to talk a little bit about now is our thoughts, as well as how can we challenge our thoughts. So before we do this, I did this in my last webinar, so for the people that have been in there before, you know the answers, but I want to talk a little bit about thoughts and how we develop thoughts. So question, how many thoughts do you think we have in a day? Thousands, 50,000, too much, thousands, millions, 60,000, 70,000. Yeah, we do know we get a lot of thoughts. So we actually have anywhere between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day, which is a lot. That's a lot of thoughts. Now, my question to you is, out of those thoughts, what percentage would you say are negative? Three quarters, 90%, 60, especially at night when you're trying to sleep. I know, right? A lot, 70%, half, 90%, 80%, 50, 85. So we've got some high percentage. 80, yeah. So some of you are very right. 80% of our thoughts are actually negative, which is pretty crazy. So if out of 12 to 60,000 thoughts we have in a day, 80% of them are negative, that's a pretty big hurdle we have to overcome. And especially when we want to be kind to ourselves, we need to be able to overcome that. Now, here's the final question for the thought process. Out of those thoughts, what percentage do you think are repetitive? 50, 90, 50, a lot, 90, 30, 60, 50, 10, 95, 70, 50, 70, 10. 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. So we have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of them are negative, and 95% of them are repetitive. So we really have to be challenging our thoughts and really challenging our beliefs. And that is really difficult. So we need to have some really good tools in our toolkit to be able to actually go, do you know what? All right, I'm gonna challenge myself in this. So I actually went through this exercise, and I'm gonna go into a bit more detail about it in this session, which was, I have a 4-step process. Now, what we really need to understand is, how do we get out of that negative thought, those negative belief systems that are keeping us in potentially a stressed, anxious state, and getting into that neocortex, that rational, being able to make really good decisions and actions to be able to move forward. So firstly, what we have to do is, especially when we're going to be challenging a belief that we have about ourselves, that's something that's keeping us limited, we have to understand that it's probably going to make us feel a bit uncomfortable. It's going to potentially cause fear. It's potentially going to cause us stress, anxiety, as well as some emotions that go with it. So sometimes our emotions might be, I'm really frustrated, I'm really angry, all of those kind of things. So the first thing that we really need to do is acknowledge. Here's the thing, when if we're having an emotional response or even feeling stressed or anxious, some people, myself, this is what actually happened to me. I didn't actually understand what was going on mentally, but physically I had to understand where I was physically feeling that emotion, where I was physically feeling that stress and anxiety. So sometimes we need to acknowledge, where am I feeling this stress, this anxiety, or also acknowledge the emotion that I'm having, and understanding that that's the emotion. So you have to acknowledge that emotion. If you're angry, acknowledge it. If you're frustrated, acknowledge it, and understanding that, because if you try and fight your frustration or your anger, you're going to get in this really negative feedback loop where you're going to be constantly getting yourself more stressed. So you need to acknowledge it, and then you have to label it. What's really interesting is when you label an emotion, or you label that negative thought, or you label that feeling, what ends up happening is you actually dissociate yourself from that, and you can actually look at it like it's a third person and go, I'm feeling really angry. And here's the thing with emotions, and something that I want to make really clear. Emotions aren't to be judged. They're not good or bad. They just are. They are who they make us up. They make us who we are. So emotions aren't typically a bad thing, but understanding the emotion you're feeling is really important, because it actually helps you take yourself out of that, so you can look at it like a third person. So acknowledge it, label it. Now, this is the part that's really important. It's where you have to press pause and you have to do some breathing. Now, we're going to practice this breathing exercise now, because it really does help. But breathing is one of those things that breathing is one of those things that I think is kind of feels like it's a bit hoo-hoo and a bit, wacky out there. I remember when I was told, oh, you don't breathe properly. And when I started to meditate, I've got a very type A personality. So for me, I was just like, I don't really want to do all that hoo-hoo stuff. I don't want to do that breathing, but there's a lot of science behind it. So you need to acknowledge it, label it, and then actually do some breathing. Now, breathing, you got to remember that stress and anxiety and anger and frustration are actually eliciting cortisol and adrenaline. Breathing can actually help overcome that, and actually can get you out of that fight or flight, that survival part of your brain, into the neocortex. Is actually helping that process along. So what I talk about is the 5-5-10, or what I call the rule of 5 breathing. And I have a handout for you that I'll give to Paul as well for this exercise. So what you're going to do is breathe. I'm going to tell you what to do, and then we're going to practice it one time. So you breathe in for 5 seconds through your nose into your stomach. You hold for 5 seconds. And what I want you to do after that is breathe out for 10. So we're going to give this a go. So I'm going to count down from 3, and then from when we get to 0, I want you to breathe in for 5 seconds. So who's ready? Just put a yes in the box if you're ready. I've got a hand up. Perfect. All right, everyone's ready. Perfect. I haven't lost anyone. All right, so in 3, 2, 1, breathe in for 5 seconds through your nose into your stomach. 3, 2, 1. I now want you to hold that breath for 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Now breathe out through your nose for 10 seconds. All right. How did everyone go? Good? How does everyone feel? Felt good. It can be hard. So Relaxed, felt good. Yeah, so sometimes that can be a little bit difficult. Sometimes we need to shorten the time, so you can do 4-4-8 or 3-3-6 if you find that really difficult. It really does relax you. There's a whole bunch of science behind it. So it is something that's really good. Got your back cracking. It cracks my ribs too. I hear you. So whoever's got iPhone, it cracks my ribs too. I have that feeling. It feels nice. So that's a really good way to do the deep breathing, and it actually helps get you from that survival part of the brain into more of that neocortex. As you've just felt, you feel really, you do feel a bit more relaxed. Now, when you're in that relaxed state, you need to understand where that emotion's coming from. Sometimes we have emotions and we don't really get where they're coming from. They just hit us. So sometimes it's actually a good idea to actually take a step back and really understand what's going on. How many of you have gone into work and you're really frustrated, you don't really know why, and then you start taking it out on other people at work, or maybe something bad has happened at work and you come home and you're taking it out at home? Who's found that they've done that? Yeah.
I don't want to admit that I have, because I've got some of the people that work with me on here.
Yeah, so I think we've all done it, right? But sometimes what ends up happening is when we're feeling really frustrated and angry and we don't understand where it's coming from, we actually start trying to find things that are making us angry, but really understanding what is the root cause of what's causing that frustration and anger or stress or anxiety, because I think it really helps. Sometimes with anxiety, we don't really know where it comes from. It's just understanding that we have it, but understanding that maybe what you're reacting to isn't really what the problem is. And that's what's really important about that understanding part. So Rebecca's put up something in here. My problem is stopping and actually taking the time out to breathe rather than letting the anxiety consume me. That's where that is really hard. That's why we have to acknowledge it and label it and then do the breathing, because if we don't acknowledge it and we just start trying to breathe it and we don't understand what's going on, it's just going to annoy us a little bit more. It can actually cause a bit more frustration. So it's being able to practice that. And I would also say practicing the rule of 5 breathing in the morning and throughout the day, even if you're not frustrated or anything like that, but just taking those moments to do a couple of deep breathing breaths is a really good way to make sure that you're not getting stuck into that anxiety and that survival part of the brain and getting into that neocortex. For a lot of people, they actually don't know they're stressed or anxious. They have no idea. So sometimes doing this breathing can actually help prevent us from lashing out and doing those things, and actually prevent an uncomfortable situation before we get ourselves into a difficult situation. Now, the 4th step, and I'm going to break this down into a little bit more actionable steps on what we can do every single day to help this, is actually taking action. So the steps that we have so far is acknowledge and label, pause and take a deep breath. And the 3rd one is understand where it's coming from and what we can do about it. And then the 4th one is really, really important, which is the action. Now, in regards to the growth mindset, what they've been finding, especially in neuroscience, is that they actually believed that our brains were what they were. They didn't change. We couldn't create new pathways. But what they've actually found is that our brain has neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the ability to open up new pathways in the brain to actually stimulate different parts of the brain. The action part is really important in that neuroplasticity part. So I want to spend a bit of time about how do we action and how can we actually create a really good mechanism to action appropriately. Now, doing the first 3 steps is really important because you're getting out of the survival mechanism and you're going into the action. But who here has, for instance, let's say you're getting really frustrated with this is a very random example, it's just popped into my head. You get frustrated with somebody at work. Maybe someone's upsetting you at work and they don't talk to you the way that you want them to talk to you. Maybe there is a little bit of limiting boundaries. Who here's been in a situation where they've had to be uncomfortable about work and maybe have to potentially, remove the conflict? So has anyone else? Yeah. Bosses. Yeah, it's really hard to talk to bosses. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm happy to go into that as well. So I'm happy to talk a little about what we can do with that. But I think one of the biggest things is controlling your emotions, because if you go up to your boss and say, I don't like the way you're talking to me, it's not going to be very helpful. But what I want to talk a little bit about is how do we develop really good actions? Because, let's say you get home and you're really upset with your boss. You've done the 3 steps. you've calmed yourself down, you've gotten yourself into a rational state, you've gone into the neocortex and you're like, I know what the action is. You've written it down. You're like, I have to go speak to my boss. I have to go tell my boss, you know what, I really don't like the way you're talking to me, whatever it is. And then the next day you're really pumped up the day before, and then you go into work and you're about to go do it, and all the motivation and drive that you had to do it and all the confidence you had just disappears. How many of you been, it's the same thing when you create a new goal, right? It's like, let's say I want to lose weight. I'm going to go running every single day, but the first day you wake up to do it, it's really difficult. Who understands and has experienced that? I've got a couple of years there. I think we've all kind of always. So understanding that feeling, yeah. Hang on, but they usually get rid of you. Jacqueline. Okay, so you don't have the fear. It's being able to communicate. Okay, that's a different thing. It's I know that's difficult. Yeah, absolutely. So I think with the action part, sorry, yes, my boss is constantly up and down. It's really difficult when you have so talking about the fixed growth mindset, it's really difficult if your boss is in a fixed mindset and you have a growth mindset, because a lot of those bosses, you'll hear them say things like, this is how we've always done it. Do it my way. Don't question me. I'm always right. You're wrong. So I think it can be really difficult in that. And so I can talk a little bit about that after I get through this next phase and how to actually handle those situations. But one of the biggest things I think is understanding that it's not you. I think sometimes when you have a difficult boss that has a fixed mindset, it's actually understanding, do you know what? This isn't mine. That's theirs. Like I'm happy to learn myself, but I'm not going to accept that kind of behavior. So it's being able to really understand that part. So I think that's really important to understand as well when you have difficult bosses. I've had some difficult bosses in my time, so I understand that. I can see Jackie just sitting there just going, oh goodness, I've had the same thing. I can't hear what you're saying, but I can trying to read your lips. So I can see you're frustrated. But here's the thing when it comes to action, and especially if we're talking about, let's say we have a goal and we've got a self-limiting belief that we need to overcome. We've done the steps. Now, how do we action it? Now, I want to talk about hormones right now, because I think understanding the biochemistry of the brain is really important, and the neurotransmitters and the happy hormones that we would call them, and how to actually, firstly, how can we use them to action? And also, how can we actually, obviously when we're feeling motivated, it's really good to be able to to try new things and to challenge ourselves. But it's also really difficult when we're having shitty days, when we're having a bad day. It's really hard to keep positive and to keep those negative mindsets down packed. So what can we do to actually put ourselves and prime ourselves to be in the best versions of ourselves, to actually action new things and challenge ourselves out of limiting beliefs, and how we can actually grow as a person? So the first thing that I want to talk about, we've got the 4 hormones, which is dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to break it down into how we can actually help this overcome stress and anxiety, as well as being able to action and create new goals. So the first thing that I want to talk about, especially when we're wanting to action things, is goal setting. I think one of the biggest things that I speak to a lot of people is they have these really big goals that takes a lot of effort to actually achieve them. But what ends up happening is they don't have micro goals. Now, dopamine is a really important hormone because it actually is that reward hormone. So what actually happens with dopamine? So let's use an example. So let's say you set yourself a goal to get up early in the morning and to go for a run. Let's say most of us have tried to get up in the morning, go do some exercise. So how many of us know, I've actually just read I'm going to come back to the chat, by the way, but how many of us have, you've set yourself a goal and you've done that little thing in the morning. How many of you have felt that, when you come home from that run or you come home from that bit of exercise, you feel pretty good. You feel like you've achieved something. How many of you have felt that? Or any type of goal? Yeah. It's a freaking awesome feeling, because that's dopamine. Dopamine is a hormone that actually kind of secretly high fives you. It's like, yeah, you've done good. Look at how good you're doing. It actually helps keep up that motivation. So sometimes it's being able to feel that you've achieved something. So this is why we need to break down really big goals into micro goals. So I always say, what is 3 micro things that you can do every single day that would actually make you feel achieved? So breaking really small goals down so you can actually constantly be getting that dopamine hit throughout the day. it helps with your mood. It actually lightens your mood. It helps prevent negative thoughts. It also helps prevent stress and anxiety because you're actually feeling like you're achieving something. And the thing is with humans, we're very purpose driven. We actually do like having direction. We do like having purpose. We also like having a lot of structure. So we have to be able to push forward on that. So I always say to people every single day, what are 3 small, tiny little things? They don't have to be giant that you can do that would make you feel really good. And there's also, it's a reward hormone as well. So what could you be, maybe you've decided I'm going to, get up every morning, go for a walk. How do you want to feel after that, as well as what is some kind of reward that you would like to have after that as well. So I think that's really good. You're missing the gym. I'm missing the gym too. I'm having to do home workouts and I don't like it, but I do it. Which leads me to the next one, by the way. So does anyone have any questions about dopamine before I jump on to the next hormone to actually help us out? Yeah, weight training is amazing. Any questions before I move on? Nope. Thanks, Rebecca. All right, I'm just going to move on. So Rebecca has spoken for everyone. So the next one is endorphins. How many of you have heard of endorphins? Yep. What do we know about endorphins? I have a really fun fact about endorphins as well, by the way, that's going to, happy hormones. It is a happy hormone. Hello, chocolate. Happy feeling the body. So endorphins, yes, endorphins are really interesting. They come about when we've done physical exercise. So endorphins are released when we do something that it's a bit of an anesthesia as well. So it actually helps with, when we do exercise, when we're in a bit of pain, it actually get released. It actually makes us feel good. Here's a really fun fact about endorphins as well. And this is something that I tell people when they're feeling really stressed and anxious. I actually talk to managers about this, especially if they're seeing one of their employees who have stress and anxiety, is to actually be able to elicit the help of endorphins to actually help with that. So when we're stressed and anxious, our cortisol and adrenaline goes up. Endorphins can actually help overcome them. So it actually can help lower the cortisol and it can actually help lower the adrenaline as well. So sometimes when we're feeling really stressed out, we actually have to do some kind of exercise. Now, if you think about the fight or flight response, we're actually priming our body to run away or fight a potential threat. So sometimes actually removing ourselves from a situation, going for a walk, going for a quick run can actually increase the endorphins. It can also help lower the cortisol and the adrenaline, which is what we really want to do, because that running through our body is going to prevent us from being able to think clearly. So endorphins are really good. So finding a way to incorporate endorphins, whether it's just doing even like 10 minutes of doing as many burpees as you can in 10 minutes, or going for, doing a couple of sprints up and down your street, or even going for a brisk walk can be really helpful to actually get yourself out of those, get you out of that sort of stressed mindset. So endorphins are really, really important. Does anyone have any questions about endorphins? I'm just looking over at the chat and I'm seeing chocolate and chips. We're going to talk about nutrition right in the next happy hormone. Any questions before I move on? Dancing at home, I love that. My fiance loves a good dance, so he makes me do dancing with him, even though it's not my jam, but I do it because he likes it. All right, so I can't see any questions coming in. If you want to unmute yourself and jump in with a question, if you feel that's more comfortable, do that. I'm cool with that.
Katie, you're not a big fan of chocolate and chips then together?
No, I'm a big fan of them. I'm just about to talk about serotonin and about gut health. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I actually think chips and chocolate are completely fine. I have no dramas with that. They do make us feel good. I actually say to some people who, when I was a nutritionist, we had to talk a lot about cheat days, which I'm not the biggest fan of talking about cheat days. I actually like people to talk about eating foods that they like consistently, but if they feel like they want to reward themselves, using the dopamine, going, high-fiving yourself, but actually giving yourself, it's like, if I do this, then I can have those chips and chocolates and things like that. So that's another way we can look at it as well. But I'm about to talk about serotonin, because serotonin is so important. Now, don't forget, we're trying to prime our bodies to be positive throughout the day. Now, how many of us know what serotonin is? I think we've heard of it. So D's come out. I feel like anxiety very much affects my gut health. Absolutely. So fun fact, D, I don't know, I didn't really mention this, but I actually started my career as a digestive health specialist before I started talking about anxiety, and I had to do that. I had to talk about, gut health is a huge issue with anxiety. So it's a neurotransmitter, helps with sleep. I want baklava. Baklava is delicious, by the way. You've heard of it. Okay. All right. So when we talk about serotonin, it is a happy hormone. It is actually one of the biggest happy hormones that we do have. So we do have to nurture it. Now, where do you think serotonin is produced? Just a thought. What do you think if we're talking about serotonin? Where do you think in the body it would be produced? There's no wrong answer, by the way. There's no silly answer here. Stomach, brain. I'm going to say brain. All right. So serotonin is actually developed in the gut and the brain, but it really does have a big part in the gut. So we have to really, really take care of our gut. So there's actually a lot of new studies coming out suggesting that IBS and IBD, which is irritable bowel syndrome and irritable bowel disease, is actually linked to poor digestion, as well as it can actually increase stress and anxiety. So when I first started on my journey, when I had really bad gut health issues and I had really poor inflammation throughout my body, my immunity was shut to hell, I actually really focused on my nutrition to begin with. And sometimes with stress and anxiety, what we have to understand, stress and anxiety has a huge impact on our digestion. It actually lowers the blood flow to the digestive tract. So we don't digest food properly. So if you go to my previous webinar, I've spoken all about that. So I don't want to double up too much. But it really is something that is really important. Now, where the research is taking us, it's kind of looking at what came first, the chicken or the egg. Was it the stress and anxiety that caused the poor digestion, or was it the poor digestion causing the stress and anxiety? I personally like to tackle both because I think that they're both as important as each other to tackle. I think actually looking at how can we increase gut health to increase serotonin, that's a really important part. But how can we also manage stress and anxiety? And we've talked a little bit about the exercises that we can do to help prevent stress, well, not prevent, but how we can overcome stress and anxiety in the moment. And what we're talking about now is how we can prevent stress and anxiety from happening throughout the day. So we really need to talk about gut health and taking care of our guts, and how can we increase serotonin as well. So there's two ways. Firstly, obviously nutrition. Nutrition is a really big part of how we can increase serotonin. We need to talk about gut health. So we need to talk about things that are really good for the gut. Now, I always talk about the gut bacteria and how we can increase the good bacteria. Now, really fun fact, a lot of people talk about good bacteria and bad gut bacteria. Now, I'm sure we've all heard of it. We've all probably heard of probiotics. We've all heard about these things. Now, fun fact, bad bacteria doesn't necessarily mean that it's a different bacteria that's coming into the gut. What's actually happening is that our body's overgrowing a certain bacteria in our gut. We have thousands of different strands of gut bacteria, but what's happening is if we don't digest food properly or we have a poor diet, it actually overgrows certain bacteria in our gut that actually causes health issues that can actually lower serotonin as well. So we need to actually put our gut in a really good situation to be able to digest foods. So I always talk about, and this is something that I talk a lot about in my webinars, which is we all know how to eat healthy. How many of you just put a yes or no on the box that you know how to eat healthy? Well, you know what an idea of a healthy diet is. Yeah. We all know what a healthy diet is. It's being able to stick to it, which is really important. So we can use the dopamine, and we can use the dopamine part to actually help us with that. But we all know what a healthy diet is. But when we're talking about gut health in particular, we need to really look at some really particular foods that we need to incorporate in our diet and take certain things out. So if you're suffering from a bit of stress and anxiety and your gut health is really impacted, foods that I really talk about avoiding is things like sugar and alcohol. Do not hate me for the alcohol part. I know that everyone thinks that you can drink alcohol to reduce stress, but actually can be something that can actually be quite difficult as well. It's really harsh on the gut. So we need to be removing the sugars and alcohol in particular, and especially processed and refined foods. So eating a lot of fruits, vegetables, clean meats. If you're a vegetarian, making sure you're eating legumes and pulses and things like that. Eating the really clean types of foods and avoiding the sugars and the really highly processed foods. Now, the foods that you really also want to increase to make sure that you have good digestion is fiber. Now, fiber is really, really important because it actually helps produce, balances the gut bacteria and producing the good bacteria. I hate saying that, but it's easy because everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say good bacteria. But it also helps, it also helps what I call there's a thing called the prebiotic phase. So we've all heard of probiotics, I'm guessing, but a lot of people haven't heard about prebiotics. So prebiotics are actually to help you produce your own good gut bacteria, which can actually help with the serotonin production as well. So these foods are like garlic, onion, fermented foods. Someone actually put up in here fermented foods before. I don't know if that was private or not, but having fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, things like that are really good to actually produce that good bacteria, but also really high fibrous foods. So adding things like hemp seeds, chia seeds, you know, really unprocessed, like whole grain rices, pastas, things like that. That's really good for our gut health and making sure that we're increasing serotonin. There've also a lot of studies come out saying that complex carbohydrates like rices, pastas, good quality breads, not the processed stuff, by the way, are really good at helping increase serotonin as well. So incorporating that into your diet is really important as well. And I would strongly, I'm going to stress this, if you have digestive issues, please reduce the alcohol content. It is the one thing that can really undo a lot of good work, even if your diet's really good. That's just my little stress of the day, just stressing that out to people. So I'm just going to go over to the chats. Good quality sourdough bread, I heard, is good for the gut. Yeah, it is. There is a thing called too much fruit. So a lot of people, so I'm just going to touch on this. So a lot of people have fructose intolerances. So I actually talk a lot about people just, you know, fruit's really great, but don't, you know, I would say eat more vegetables than fruit. So making sure that, you know, 2 serves of fruit a day is fine. The rest of vegetables, I call vegetables a free food. So you can eat as much as you want in that one as well. So that's really good as well. All right. The next thing, so do we have any questions about serotonin and gut health? No, I also can talk about the second thing to increase serotonin. The second thing you can do to increase serotonin is actually get outside and actually get some fresh air and go outside in the sunshine. That actually really does help stimulate serotonin as well. I know with lockdown, a lot of people have been guilty of not leaving their house or not going outside or not going out as much as they can. I actually really recommend going outside at least for 15, 20 minutes a day is really important as well. So definitely would suggest that helps with the serotonin and just little things that you can do in the day. If you are somebody that, you know, maybe you want to go for a walk first thing in the morning, that's fine. Maybe you just want to have your morning coffee outside. That's also a really good idea, just to get outside, take a couple of deep breaths. That really does help with serotonin. I'm going to talk about supplements once I finish this part, because I'm going to talk about daily structure. So I'm happy to answer all of that then, but just remind me, because I don't want to forget, because that is a really good question about supplementation. Go outside for a walk, or is it just fresh air? It is just fresh air, getting some sunshine. I also say go for a walk because you've got the endorphins there, but if you don't want to go for a walk, you don't have to go for a walk. You can just sit outside. I'm just responding to Josie, your question. You can have that outside in your garden if you have a garden. So that's definitely something that you can 100% do. Now, the fourth and final happy hormone is called oxytocin. How many of you have heard of oxytocin? I'm sure some of the ladies in the room have, but has anyone else heard of oxytocin, and what do we know about it? Yes. Heard of it? Yep, the love cuddle hormone. Absolutely right, Karen. You haven't, Rebecca, that's fine. I'm going to go through it as well. So oxytocin is a really interesting hormone. It's actually what some people call the love hormone. It's the happy hormone. So think about it, think back on a relationship, or maybe when you first met your husband or your boyfriend. You know, that first few months, maybe year or so, where you're in that honeymoon phase and you're really happy and you feel really good and you're all loved up. Do we all know what I'm talking about? Got some nods. Yep. We can thank the lovely oxytocin for that. We can thank it for that. Mothers also get this when they're lactating and they're just giving birth as well. However, oxytocin is a really important hormone because it actually helps with that bonding. It actually really helps with that building relationships and building trust. It's actually really important, especially when we're talking about relationships as well as manage, or I talk a lot about this in leadership because it is really important to be able to develop that oxytocin and increasing that trust and increasing that bond. Now, as humans, we really do want to feel that connection. We want to feel that we're validated. We want to feel that we're important. And oxytocin is a really important hormone for that. So the way that we can actually stimulate oxytocin is actually, this is really weird. There's two ways we can do it. We can actually be giving compliments as well as when we receive compliments. Think about a time when you've done something nice for somebody. So for instance, I can go to Paul and go, Paul, thank you so much for organizing this webinar. I really enjoyed it. Or even if you've gone to Paul going, I love that webinar, it was fantastic. Paul's going to feel really good about that. And you're going to feel really good about giving that feedback as well. It's actually like, I've done something really nice. Because if Paul comes back to you and go, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. I put a lot of work into it. So I'm so glad you enjoyed that. It actually makes you both feel really good, and you build a bond and you build that trust and you build that relationship, and it makes you feel good. So this is where the kindness part comes in. I know it's Mental Health Awareness Week and we're talking a lot about kindness right now. The oxytocin hormone is really important at creating that kindness to others and kindness to ourselves as well. So it's definitely something that we can be doing on a day-to-day basis. Maybe not daily, but maybe, thinking about how can, what can I be doing in that and building those relationships? Because it's really important right now, especially because we're in lockdown. We can't go see our friends. We can't see our family. So we need to be able to build that relationship in different ways as well. So that's definitely something that is really important. Now, before I move on, because I know I've got 5 minutes left, so I want to close it up. So what we can do every single day to actually help balance our beliefs, as well as how we can what we can do every single day to make sure that we're challenging our beliefs and getting out of negative mindsets and the hormone part. But are there any questions? Now, there was a question about supplementation. Supplementation, where did it go? Do you recommend any healthy bacteria supplements to improve health? So my personal opinion, and again, this is just my personal opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of probiotics. And the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of probiotics is because we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different strands of gut bacteria in our stomach. Probiotics only cover off a handful. They don't actually cover off a variety. So it actually might not be the right thing to do. So I actually always say, just eat a good source of fiber. Make sure you're eating all of those things. It's not going to hurt. I'm not saying it's going to cause damage. It's just sometimes I personally think that, let's say you have an overgrowth of one bacteria, the probiotic might not actually help that. So that's my opinion there. So I'm just going to read some of the questions. I feel good when I've cooked a meal and the person really enjoys eating it. Rebecca, absolutely. If you cook a meal, like for instance, I know when I have cooked a meal and I've done it with love and I've not rushed it, my fiance notices and he loves it and he encourages me and it makes me want to do it more. I'm like, okay, I want to get that pat on the back. I want to feel that encouragement. I often tell my secretarial team how I appreciate it and makes me feel good and motivates them. It really does. Here's the thing. I know that we're not talking so much about management and leadership, but it is actually something that is really good to build that trust and to keep people motivated. So it is really important. Any questions before I finish up, or talk about how to structure your day and how to actually start understanding how to overcome limiting beliefs in the last 3 minutes, because I'm probably going to go over, let's be fair. Where can I find recordings of your webinars? So Paul has the first one. This one's getting recorded as well. I have a handful that I'm going to be putting up in another area, so happy to let you know about that as well. I'm going to be handing out I'm going to be giving Paul a handout that he can give to all of you. So going through some of the stuff that I've spoken a little bit about today. And so you can always contact me as well. And if you really want those webinars, happy to give you access to the ones that I've previously done as well. So happy to do that. People's attitudes affect your mood. Absolutely. It's like when someone's in a bad mood and you pick up on their vibe, you're like, oh, God damn it, now I'm in a bad mood. You can actually control it. That's a webinar for another day. Okay, so what I want to talk a little bit about, how can we actually overcome self-limiting beliefs and what can we do? So one of the things that you need to do is get into a daily routine and be really reflective on your thoughts and the beliefs that you do have, and really understanding, are these actually serving me? Are they getting in the way of what I want to achieve? Are they causing me stress and anxiety? Or are they causing me to behave in a way that I don't appreciate? So actually spending even daily reflecting on how your thoughts and your beliefs, and actually being able to understand how you can what beliefs you want to challenge, and beliefs that you may, maybe they make you really uncomfortable, but they potentially keeping you where they are. And I think having that self-reflection and also understanding the language that you're using to yourself. If you have a negative thought, it's like, actually, I don't want to think that. I want to have a positive thought about that. So thinking about being really reflective on your thoughts and your attitudes and your beliefs is really important, and really start questioning, is this belief serving me? Is it keeping me where I am? Is it actually leaving me with a bit of a fixed mindset? Is that something that I could actually develop, but how could I do it? So they're the kind of things that I would suggest, and practicing self-reflection is really, really awesome. I think a lot of people forget to do it. It's such a simple thing that we can do every single day to help ourselves, but spending even 5-10 minutes in the evening asking yourself really, really difficult questions is, reflecting on your day. It's like, how did I behave today? Is there something that I'm not proud of? Is there something that I could have changed? What could I be doing differently to actually help progress me in moving forward? So they're the different types of things that we can do. I know I went off on a bit of a tangent about the happy hormones, but I think it's really important to know how to prime ourselves in a positive mindset so we can make changes, because it is really difficult when we're in a negative mindset to make a positive change. So that's definitely something that I would suggest. So I know there's a few questions coming in, but Paul, do you have any questions or anything you want to chime in on while I read some of the questions?
I haven't got any questions as such, but whilst you're going through that and people are kind of getting things through, I know somebody just asked a second ago about recordings and what have you. Next week we're taking a bit of a week off for live events, but we're going to be publicising a bunch of the videos that we've done. We're going to do 1 or 2 a day, so there'll be lots of things coming out. So Katie's will definitely be one of them, because I know that a lot of people have been asking for them. So just whilst Katie's going through those, if anyone hasn't joined already, please jump on the Business Support Network. You can find us on either Facebook or LinkedIn. It would be great to have you on board.
Yeah. So a question was, do we have any good self-development books or self-care books? I'm a big fan of personal development. So some of the books that I've really enjoyed is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So Power of Now. Please, I'm going to brutalize his last name, his first name, so please don't judge me on that, but you'll find it, The Power of Now. I would also recommend Mindset by Carol Dweck, so talking a lot more about the fixed and growth mindset. That's a really good book. It actually really helps you challenge your own beliefs and your own thought systems as well. So definitely something that's really important. So David's written to everyone, writing down, discussing through things you've been grateful for each day's evening. Yeah, gratitude's a really awesome one. I actually try to do gratitude 2 times a day. So there's actually, I'm going to put this here. So look at the 5-minute journal. Now the 5-minute journal is really awesome because it actually gets you in the morning to write down 3 things that you're grateful for. And then in the evening, it talks about 3 things that you have done really good and how you've achieved, but also 3 things that you could potentially be doing better at as well. So I love the 5-minute journal as well.
There's so many coming through. It's quite difficult to keep track of it, and I keep.
No, I'm the same. I'm like scrolling. I'm like, goodness, what have I missed? Someone was like,
I keep trying to grab a question, and then another one comes, and I lose it. So just bear with me. As soon as I grab it.
So Rebecca's written, is there anywhere I can find some information about nutrition? Now you've said diet exercise could be linked to stress. I really want to try and change a few things in my diet. So Rebecca, there is a lot of information out there. I'm actually going to be doing a webinar next week talking solely about diet and nutrition and anxiety. So if you want, I can send you the link to that webinar. It's completely free as well. So if you want that, just let me know. Like I said, I'm going to send you a handout, so he'll have my email on it, so you can come along to that as well. So what I'll do is, if you follow me on LinkedIn or if you just send me an email, I'll absolutely send you that link once I've got it all squared away. So I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, and I know that Katie, you're part of the group as well, aren't you? So anything that you've got coming up, make sure that you post it to the group so they can get access to the.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I'll just pop it in the group. I'll pop the link in the group about the webinars that I've got coming up. So that's completely fine.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Has anybody got any questions? Does anyone want to come off mute for a second? I know we've run over ever so slightly, but if anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question live, then that would be great. I'm sure that would be fine.
Oh yeah, you unmute yourself. I'm happy to answer any questions. Don't be shy.
If not, you know, thank you for everyone who's joined us.
Yeah, thank you for everyone for coming along. I hope you got a lot out of it. I know the weather's really nice outside, so I am just so grateful that you've given me an hour of your time for me to just talk about what I spoke about. So thank you so much for coming along, and hopefully get outside and get some sunshine.
Yeah, there's some great comments coming through. I can see that everybody's really enjoyed it once again, Katie. So look, thank you so much for your time again today. We really, really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone that's logged in. Really, really appreciate you giving up your time, as Katie says, especially on this amazing sunny day.
Yeah, it's been, it is a nice day, so thank you.
Brilliant. Well, look, okay, so I think we're all done. Thank you so much, Katie. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and same to everyone else. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic afternoon.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys.